The Zephyrian exploration vessel Luminous Dawn moved through the cold darkness of space like a ghost ship hunting for secrets. Commander Veltar stood at the center of his bridge, his blue-scaled hands gripping the command console as he watched. The primitive solar system spin before them on the main display. For months now, his crew had been studying the third planet from the star, watching the creatures called humans as they crawled between their worlds on pillars of fire and smoke. Science. Officer Crickson floated beside him, her tentacles dancing over the scanning equipment with practiced ease. She had cataloged 17 different human vessels in the past week alone, each one more crude than the last. Chemical rockets that burned fuel like children playing with matches. Energy weapons that could barely scratch the hull of a proper starship, communication systems that moved slower than thought itself. The humans were exactly what the Galactic Council had predicted, a young species still learning to walk among the stars. The asteroid belt stretched before them like a river of broken stone, and it was there that they spotted their next target. The human vessel appeared on their sensors as little more than a metal tube, with engines attached to one end and weapons bolted to the sides. According to their databases, it was designated UN's Liberty, a patrol craft of the human military forces. Commander Veltar examined the readouts with mild interest, noting the vessel's length of 600 meters and crew, complement of approximately 200 beings. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the Liberty from a bridge that looked like it had been assembled by children playing with metal blocks. Veltar could see the human through their long-range viewers, a creature of average height with brown hair and eyes that seemed to hold more intelligence than his primitive surroundings. Suggested. The captain moved between workstations with confidence, checking on his crew as they performed their simple duties. Dr. Lisa Grant worked in what the humans called a medical bay, tending to crew members with tools that reminded Veltar of ancient surgical implements his own people had abandoned centuries ago. Chief Engineer Ben Rodriguez crawled through maintenance tunnels that looked barely wide enough for his body, adjusting systems with his bare hands instead of using proper automated repair drones. Navigation Officer Amy Collins plotted courses on displays that showed simple two-dimensional maps, while weapons specialist Ryan Parker manually loaded what appeared to be explosive projectiles into firing chambers. Everything about the human vessel screamed of primitive design and backwards thinking. Their computers processed information at speeds that would embarrass a child's toy. Their life support systems leaked atmosphere through poorly sealed joints, and their engines produced more waste heat than useful thrust. The ship itself appeared to be held together with metal fasteners and chemical adhesives, materials so crude that Veltar wondered how it managed to function at all. Crickson's tentacles stopped moving over her controls, and she turned to face her commander with an expression of scientific curiosity. The human vessel was conducting what appeared to be a routine patrol, moving between asteroids in a pattern that suggested they were either mining operations or searching for something hidden among the rocks. Their behavior was predictable, almost boring in its simplicity. Veltar made his decision with the casual indifference of a researcher selecting a specimen for study. He ordered a standard deep scan of the human vessel, the same procedure they had performed on dozens of other primitive craft throughout the galaxy. The scanning array would penetrate every deck, every compartment, every molecular structure of the ship, creating a complete three-dimensional map of everything from the largest structural beam to the smallest electronic component. The process would take several minutes to complete, during which time the luminous dawn would remain hidden behind the shadow of a large asteroid. The humans possessed no sensors capable of detecting Zephyrian technology, so there was no risk of discovery. The scan would be completely invisible to their primitive equipment, leaving no trace that they had ever been observed. Lieutenant Commander Steve Mitchell sat at his tactical station, monitoring sensor displays that showed nothing but empty space and floating rocks. Communications Officer Rachel Adams listened to routine chatter from human mining operations, while Intelligence Officer Karen Murphy reviewed patrol reports that contained nothing more interesting than asteroid composition data. Security Chief Tony Williams walked the corridors of the ship, checking on crew members who performed their duties with the steady competence of beings who had done the same tasks thousands of times before. The Liberty moved through space with the predictable rhythm of a machine designed by engineers who understood the basic principles of physics but lacked the imagination to transcend them. Every system operated within normal parameters. Every crew member performed their assigned function. Every component functioned exactly as its designers had intended. The ship was a perfect example of human technology, functional, reliable, and utterly without surprise. Supply Officer Greg Thompson managed cargo holds filled with spare parts and food supplies, while Fleet Admiral Patricia Hayes existed only in the ship's communication logs as a distant authority figure who sent orders from somewhere deeper in human space. Chief Science Officer Danny Clark conducted experiments that involved mixing chemicals and observing predictable reactions, and Chaplain Linda Brooks held religious services for crew members who still believed in invisible beings that lived beyond. The stars. Everything about the human vessel reinforced what the Zephyrians already knew about this young species. They were tool users who had learned to travel between worlds, but they remained bound by the same limitations that had held back countless other primitive civilizations. They thought in linear patterns, solved problems with brute force, and approached the universe with the same lack of imagination that characterized all early spacefaring cultures. The scanning array hummed with barely audible energy as it penetrated the human vessel's hull and began mapping its interior structure. Data flowed into the luminous Dawn's computers in steady streams, creating detailed images of corridors and chambers, weapons and engines, crew members and equipment. Every detail was recorded with perfect accuracy, from the chemical composition of the hull plating to the electrical patterns in the humans' primitive brains. Veltar watched the scanning progress with mild interest, expecting to add another routine entry to his catalog of primitive technologies. The Liberty would join the ranks of hundreds of other vessels he had studied, each one a small piece in the larger puzzle of human development. When the scan was complete, he would file his report with the Galactic Council and move on to the next system, the next species, the next opportunity to observe the slow evolution of intelligence among the younger races. The first warning sign appeared as a tiny anomaly in the scanning data, so small that the ship's computers initially classified it as instrument error. The scanning data began to process through the Zephyrian computers with the smooth efficiency of technology perfected over thousands of years. Science Officer Crickson watched the information flow across her displays, expecting to see the familiar patterns of metal corridors, electronic systems, and biological crew members moving through separate spaces. Instead, the first complete scan results made her tentacles freeze in horror above her control panel. The human vessel was not what it appeared to be from the outside. The Liberty was not simply a ship with crew aboard, moving through space like a container filled with separate living beings. The scanning data showed something that violated every principle of spacecraft design that the Zephyrians had ever encountered in their travels across the galaxy. The ship and its crew had somehow merged into a single entity that defied classification as either machine or organism. Commander Veltar leaned forward to examine the display, his scaled features twisting into an expression of confusion and growing alarm. The corridors of the human vessel were lined with what appeared to be living tissue, pale and pink and pulsing with slow rhythmic contractions. Crew members like Navigation Officer Amy Collins moved through these passages not as beings walking through hallways, but as blood cells flowing through arteries in a vast circulatory system. The walls themselves breathed with a gentle rise and fall that matched the heartbeats of the humans inside. Metal support beams were wrapped in organic material that looked suspiciously like muscle fiber, contracting and relaxing to provide structural support that adapted to changing stresses. The ship's hull was not simply armor plating, but had become a kind of living skin that could heal itself when damaged and grow stronger in response to external threats. Dr. Lisa Grant worked in her medical bay, but she was not treating injured crew members in any way the Zephyrians could understand. The scanning data showed her performing surgical procedures that grafted ship components directly into human nervous systems. Crew members lay on tables while she connected fiber optic cables to their spinal cords and installed processing units that merged with their brain tissue. The humans were not using their ship's systems, but had become part of those systems in ways that made it impossible to tell where the crew ended and the vessel began. Engineering. Chief Ben Rodriguez had undergone the most extreme transformation of all. His body had been modified with tubes and valves that connected directly to the ship's power systems. He was not maintaining engines in any traditional sense, but was feeding them with his own blood, which flowed through biological conduits to fusion reactors that converted human plasma into the energy needed for faster-than-light travel. His heartbeat regulated the ship's power output, and his breathing controlled the flow of coolant through systems that were as much organ as machine. Weapons. Specialist Ryan Parker no longer loaded ammunition into firing chambers, but had become a living weapon himself. His arms had been replaced with biomechanical appendages that grew projectiles from his own bone marrow, and his eyes had been modified with targeting systems that allowed him to see through space and time to calculate, firing solutions that accounted for variables no computer could process. When he fired the ship's weapons, he was not pulling triggers, but was willing destruction into existence through pure biological force. The most disturbing discovery was in the ship's armory, where the Zephyrians expected to find conventional weapons and ammunition. Instead, the scanning data revealed storage chambers filled with crystallized human emotions. Compressed rage glowed with red energy that could burn through the hulls of enemy vessels, while distilled human suffering had been weaponized into projectiles that could induce psychological collapse in any intelligent being they struck. Containers held concentrated human determination that had been processed into an explosive more powerful than antimatter, capable of destroying entire space stations with the force of pure willpower. Communications Officer Rachel Adams had been connected to the ship's sensor array through neural implants that allowed her to perceive electromagnetic radiation as physical sensation. She could taste the fear in enemy transmissions and smell the desperation in their tactical communications. Her brain had been modified to process information at light speed while retaining the intuitive pattern recognition that made humans such effective predators. When she intercepted alien signals, she was not decoding them, but was consuming them. Like food, digesting their meaning through biological processes that turned data into nourishment. Security. Chief Tony Williams and his team no longer patrolled the ship's corridors, but had become antibodies in a living war machine. Their bodies had been enhanced with biological weapons that grew from their own genetic material, and their minds had been programmed with instinctive responses that would activate whenever foreign organisms entered their vessel. They were not guards protecting a ship, but were immune system components designed to destroy any infection that threatened the greater organism. The ship's computer systems were not electronic devices, but were biological neural networks grown from human brain tissue. Thousands of human minds had been harvested and connected into a collective intelligence that could process tactical information, navigate through hyperspace, and make strategic decisions with a speed and creativity that no artificial intelligence could match. The humans had not built a computer to serve them, but had become a computer that served itself. Most horrifying of all was the discovery of nursery chambers deep within the ship's core. The scanning data showed biological wombs were new human ship. Hybrids were being grown, creatures that would be born already connected to their vessels and would never know existence as separate beings. The humans were not building a fleet of ships, but were breeding a race of living weapons that could reproduce and evolve, and adapt to any threat they might encounter. The Liberty was not a vessel carrying 200 crew members, but was a single organism with 200 specialized organs, each one a former human who had chosen to sacrifice their individual existence for the good of the collective. They had abandoned everything that made them recognizably human, and had become something that was simultaneously more and less than human. A predatory intelligence that could think with the speed of light while retaining the savage creativity that had allowed their species to survive on a hostile world. Crixon's tentacles began to shake uncontrollably as she realized what they were observing. The humans had not simply learned to travel between stars, but had evolved into something that could hunt other starships like prey animals. Commander Veltar's horror deepened as the scanning arrays continued to reveal layers of tactical capability that defied everything the Zephyrians understood about space warfare. The Liberty was not built for conventional combat between vessels, but had been designed as a predatory organism that hunted other ships through methods that bordered on impossible. The human vessel did not simply carry weapons, but had become a weapon itself, one that could adapt and evolve during battle to overcome any defense its prey might attempt. Lieutenant Commander Steve Mitchell sat at his tactical station, but he was not operating weapon systems in any recognizable way. The scanning data showed that his consciousness had been partially merged with the ship's targeting computer through neural interfaces that allowed biological thought to merge with electronic processing. His brain could think at the speed of light while retaining the intuitive creativity that made humans such effective killers. When he locked on to enemy targets, he was not calculating firing solutions, but was choosing exactly how his prey would die based on tactical considerations. That included psychological warfare and symbolic meaning. The ship's weapons were not mounted on external hard points, but grew from the vessel's living hull like claws and teeth. Each weapon system was connected to Mitchell's nervous system through biological conduits that carried his intentions directly to the firing mechanisms. He could will destruction into existence with pure thought, and the ship would respond by growing whatever tool was needed to accomplish his desires. If he wanted to disable an enemy vessel, the ship would generate electromagnetic pulse weapons. If he wanted to cause terror, it would create projectiles designed to inflict maximum psychological damage on survivors. The Liberty's tactical computer was not a machine, but was a living brain grown from human neural tissue and enhanced with biological modifications that allowed it to process combat data faster than any electronic system. The brain had been programmed with the combat experiences of thousands of human warriors, giving it access to tactical knowledge spanning centuries of warfare. It could predict enemy movements by analyzing their psychological profiles, anticipate their strategies by understanding their cultural backgrounds, and counter their weapons by adapting the ship's defenses in real time. Communications Officer Rachel Adams had been modified to intercept and decode alien transmissions through biological processes that were as much predation as communication. Her enhanced nervous system could taste fear in enemy radio signals and smell desperation in their tactical chatter. She could identify the emotional state of enemy commanders by analyzing the electromagnetic patterns of their transmissions, allowing her to predict their decisions before they made them. When she listened to alien communications, she was not simply gathering intelligence, but was feeding on the psychological vulnerabilities of her prey. The ship's hull was not armored metal, but was compressed human bone and cartilage that had been treated with biological processes to make it harder than any known material. The bones came from human volunteers who had chosen to become part of their ship's defenses, and their calcium had been reinforced with the molecular structure of human determination. The hull could heal itself when damaged, growing new armor, plating from the genetic material stored in the ship's biological systems. More importantly, it could adapt to incoming weapons by analyzing their effects and developing resistances that made subsequent attacks less effective. The Liberty's sensor array was not electronic equipment, but was a network of human eyes and ears that had been surgically removed from volunteers and connected to the ship's nervous system. Thousands of human sensory organs had been integrated into scanning devices that could perceive electromagnetic radiation across the entire spectrum, while retaining the pattern recognition abilities that made human senses so effective. The ship could see its enemies not just as objects in space, but could analyze their emotional states, predict their intentions, and identify their weaknesses through sensory data that no machine could interpret. Security Chief Tony Williams and his team had been transformed into something that was more virus than human. Their bodies contained biological weapons that could be transmitted through physical contact, allowing them to infect enemy boarding parties with diseases that were specifically designed to target alien physiology. They carried spores that could survive in vacuum and could infect enemy vessels through their life support systems. When enemy soldiers boarded the Liberty, they were not facing human defenders, but were exposing themselves to biological warfare agents that could destroy entire crews. Through airborne transmission, the ship's computer networks were not circuits and processors, but were living neural pathways grown from human brain tissue. The network could learn and adapt during combat, developing new tactical algorithms based on battlefield experience. It could communicate with crew members through direct neural interface, allowing the entire ship to function as a single mind with distributed processing power. The computer did not simply calculate solutions to tactical problems, but could create new strategies through biological creativity that combined logical analysis with human intuition. Most disturbing was the discovery that the Liberty could reproduce during combat. Deep within its core were biological systems that could capture genetic material from enemy vessels and incorporate it into new weapons and defenses. The ship could analyze alien technology by consuming samples of enemy equipment and could develop countermeasures by growing new biological systems that were specifically designed to defeat whatever weapons its enemies used. Each battle made the ship stronger and more dangerous as it evolved new capabilities based on the threats it encountered. The Liberty's crew quarters were not living spaces, but were breeding chambers where human consciousness could be reproduced and modified. New crew members were not recruited from outside, but were grown from the genetic material of existing crew, creating specialized organisms that were perfectly adapted to their assigned functions. The ship could replace casualties during battle by growing new crew members who already possessed the memories and skills needed to operate its systems. The vessel's power systems were not fusion reactors, but were biological engines that converted human life force directly into energy. The crew members who had volunteered to become part of the ship's power plant were kept in a state of controlled metabolism that allowed their biological processes to generate electricity while maintaining their consciousness. They experienced their service as a form of transcendent meditation, aware that their sacrifice was powering humanity's expansion into the galaxy. The scanning data revealed that every system on the Liberty had been designed not just to function, but to cause maximum psychological trauma to anyone who discovered its true nature. The humans had weaponized their own transformation, creating a vessel that would strike terror into the hearts of any alien species that encountered it. The ship was not just a weapon, but was a statement of human determination, a demonstration that they would sacrifice anything, including their own humanity, to protect what they valued. As the full scope of human military evolution became clear through the scanning data, the Zephyrian command structure faced a revelation that challenged their entire understanding of interstellar warfare. Captain Jake Morrison was not commanding a single vessel in the way that any normal species would recognize command authority. The scanning arrays revealed that he was the neural center of a distributed organism that existed across multiple dimensions of space and time, connected to other human vessels through biological networks that operated faster than light itself. Intelligence Officer Corinne Murphy had been surgically connected to quantum communication arrays that allowed her consciousness to merge with human vessels throughout the galaxy. Her brain had been modified with biological quantum processors that could maintain simultaneous awareness of thousands of different locations, allowing her to share memories and tactical knowledge with other human ships in real time. When the Liberty encountered enemy forces, Murphy was not simply gathering intelligence, but was accessing the combined combat experience of every human vessel that had ever faced similar threats. The implications of this discovery struck Commander Valtar like a physical blow. Every human ship was simultaneously one vessel and all vessels, capable of learning from each battle and instantly sharing that knowledge across their entire fleet. If one human ship discovered a weakness in Zephyrian defenses, every other human vessel in the galaxy would know about it within seconds. If an alien species developed a new weapon, the humans would have countermeasures distributed to their entire fleet. Before the weapon could be used in a second battle, the humans had solved the fundamental problem of space warfare, which was the vast distances that made coordination between vessels nearly impossible. They had accomplished this not through advanced technology, but by abandoning individual existence and becoming a collective predatory intelligence that could think and act across light years instantaneously. Each human ship was both independent and part of a greater organism, capable of making decisions based on information gathered by vessels on the other side of the galaxy. Supply. Officer Greg Thompson was not managing resources in any conventional sense that the Zephyrians could understand. The scanning data showed that he had been connected to biological systems that could process raw matter through organic chemistry, converting asteroids into ammunition and solar radiation into armor plating. His modified digestive system could break down any form of matter and reconstruct it into whatever materials the ship needed for combat operations. The Liberty could fight indefinitely in any environment because it had become capable of consuming its surroundings and converting them into weapons. The ship's manufacturing systems were not mechanical fabricators, but were biological organs that could grow new equipment from genetic templates stored in the vessel's memory banks. Thompson could produce replacement parts by directing the ship's biological systems to consume nearby space debris and process it through organic chemistry that was more efficient than any industrial system. The Liberty could repair battle damage by literally eating the wreckage of enemy vessels and using their material to grow new hull plating and weapon systems. The scanning arrays revealed storage compartments filled with compressed space itself, matter that had been processed through biological systems until it became a weapon that could be fired at enemy vessels. The humans had learned to weaponize the vacuum of space by treating it as a biological medium that could be infected with human determination and fired at their enemies like a virus. These vacuum weapons could pass through any known form of shielding. Because they were not matter or energy, but were weaponized nothingness that carried human hatred across the emptiness between stars. Fleet Admiral Patricia Hayes existed simultaneously aboard 17 different vessels, according to the quantum communication logs that Murphy maintained. Her consciousness had been distributed across multiple bodies that shared a single mind, allowing her to command human fleets through direct neural control rather than through communication systems that could be intercepted or jammed. When human vessels engaged in coordinated attacks, they were not following orders transmitted through space, but were acting as extensions of Hayes' distributed consciousness. The strategic implications of this discovery made Veltar's scales turn pale with horror. The humans were not expanding into the galaxy through colonization and conquest like other spacefaring species, but were spreading, like a biological infection that converted everything it touched into more of itself. Each new star system they entered became part of their collective consciousness, with human-modified planets serving as organs in a galaxy-spanning organism that grew stronger with every world it absorbed. Chief Science Officer Danny Clark had been conducting experiments that violated every known law of physics, not because humans lacked understanding of those laws, but because they had evolved beyond the need to obey them. His laboratory contained devices that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, allowing human ships to phase in and out of normal space to avoid enemy weapons, while maintaining the ability to fire their own armaments. The Liberty could become incorporeal when under attack and could solidify only long enough to deliver devastating counterstrikes against enemies who could not target what they could not perceive. The most chilling discovery was in the personal logs of Chaplain Linda Brooks, whose role was to maintain the crew's humanity even as they transformed into living weapons. Her records showed that the humans retained their capacity for love, compassion, and mercy throughout their metamorphosis into galactic predators. They had not lost their souls during their transformation, but had chosen to become monsters while keeping their hearts intact, ensuring that they would remember what they were fighting to protect. The humans had weaponized their own moral code, using their retained humanity as a tactical advantage that allowed them to understand their enemies' motivations and predict their behavior. They could fight with the savage efficiency of apex predators while maintaining the strategic thinking that came from caring about the consequences of their actions. Their compassion made them more dangerous than any purely violent species, because it allowed them to choose exactly how much destruction was necessary to achieve their goals. The scanning data revealed that humanity's transformation into a collective predatory intelligence was not the result of external pressure or evolutionary necessity, but was a deliberate choice made by their entire species. They had voted to abandon individual existence and become part of a galaxy-spanning organism because they understood that the universe was hostile to intelligent life and that only the strongest predators could protect the weak from cosmic threats that would destroy entire civilizations. The humans had become monsters to protect those who could not protect themselves, and they had retained their souls to ensure they would know when to stop being monsters. The final phase of the scanning process revealed the truth that would reshape galactic politics forever and leave the Zephyrian expedition questioning everything they thought they knew about the universe itself. The humans were not the primitive species that the Galactic Council had classified them as during their initial surveys of the Sol system. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, and they had been deliberately allowing themselves to appear weak and primitive as a form of cosmic mercy toward species they could never hope to match their true capabilities. Commander Veltar watched in growing horror as the scanning data revealed the existence of Fleet Admiral Patricia Hayes, whose consciousness existed simultaneously aboard thousands of different vessels scattered across dozens of star systems. She had been coordinating a galaxy-wide human expansion that had gone completely undetected by every major civilization for over 3 centuries. The primitive chemical rockets and crude energy weapons that alien observers had cataloged were not humanity's best technology, but were carefully constructed demonstrations designed to make other species feel safe, while human forces spread throughout the galaxy like an invisible plague. The scanning arrays detected quantum communication networks that connected human colonies across impossible distances, allowing instant coordination between settlements that appeared to be isolated frontier outposts. Each human world was connected to every other human world through biological networks that operated outside normal spacetime, creating a civilization that could respond to threats anywhere in the galaxy within seconds of their detection. The humans had not been slowly expanding from their home system, but had been present throughout the galaxy for centuries, hiding their true nature behind carefully maintained facades of primitive technology Chief Science Officer Danny Clark worked. In laboratories that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, conducting experiments that treated the fundamental forces of physics as biological systems that could be infected with human consciousness and bent to serve human purposes. His research had produced weapons that could destroy stars by convincing them to collapse, defensive systems that could make entire planets incorporeal when under attack, and propulsion technologies that allowed human vessels to exist in thousands of locations simultaneously while maintaining a single identity. The most disturbing revelation came from the personal files of Chaplain Linda Brooks, whose true role was not to provide spiritual guidance to the crew, but to serve as a moral anchor that prevented humanity's collective consciousness from losing sight of its original purpose. Her records detailed the great choice that humanity had made as a species when they first encountered evidence of hostile intelligences in the galaxy, civilizations that viewed the existence of other sentient life as a threat to be eliminated, rather than a wonder to be celebrated. Humanity had faced a decision that would define their place in the cosmos. They could remain as they were, individual beings living separate lives on isolated worlds, vulnerable to extinction by any sufficiently advanced hostile species. Or they could transform themselves into something capable of protecting not just human civilization, but all intelligent life in the galaxy from threats that most species could not even comprehend. They had chosen transformation, but they had done so while retaining their essential humanity through sheer force of will. The scanning data revealed that the humans were not conquerors, seeking to dominate the galaxy through military force, but were gardeners, cultivating cosmic civilization while remaining hidden as its silent guardians. They had been secretly protecting hundreds of species from extinction events, deflecting asteroids that would have destroyed inhabited worlds, eliminating hostile artificial intelligences before they could achieve galactic dominance, and preventing wars between advanced civilizations that would have left entire star systems uninhabitable for millions of years. Every major disaster that had been averted in galactic history, every peace treaty that had been negotiated between hostile species, every technological breakthrough that had allowed primitive civilizations to advance safely to spaceflight had been quietly influenced by human intervention. The humans had been manipulating galactic politics for centuries, not to advance their own interests, but to ensure that intelligent life could flourish throughout the galaxy without being destroyed by cosmic threats or its own violent tendencies. Zephyrians themselves had been saved from extinction 17 times by human intervention, though they had never known it. Their homeworld had been protected from gamma-ray bursts that would have sterilized their planet. Their early space exploration had been guided away from regions of space contaminated with hostile nanotechnology, and their first contact with other species had been carefully orchestrated to prevent cultural contamination that would have destroyed their civilization from within. The humans had developed the technology to appear primitive while maintaining their true capabilities, creating false sensor readings that showed crude chemical rockets while their actual vessels moved through dimensions that other species could not perceive. They had allowed alien observers to scan their ships and bases, feeding them carefully constructed data that reinforced the illusion of human primitiveness while concealing the true extent of their technological advancement. The Liberty itself was not a patrol vessel, but was a monitoring station designed to observe alien species and assess their potential as threats to galactic stability. Captain Morrison and his crew were not conducting routine operations, but were studying the Zephyrian expedition to determine whether their species was ready for knowledge of humanity's true nature. The entire encounter had been orchestrated by human intelligence agencies that had been tracking the luminous dawn since it entered the Sol system. The scanning process that Veltar had ordered was not revealing human secrets, but was allowing the humans to study Zephyrian technology and assess their species' level of development. Every piece of data that flowed into the luminous dawn's computers was simultaneously being analyzed by human systems that existed in parallel dimensions, giving humanity complete access to Zephyrian science and culture while revealing nothing genuine about human capabilities in return. The most terrifying realization was that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology, their biological modifications, or their strategic thinking, but was their willingness to sacrifice their own nature to preserve the nature of others. They had chosen to become the galaxy's monsters so that other species could remain innocent, accepting the burden of cosmic protection while ensuring that the civilizations they guarded would never need to know the true cost of their safety. As the scanning process completed and the luminous dawn prepared to withdraw from human space, Commander Veltar understood that his species' survival depended on never letting humanity know they had discovered the truth. The universe's most dangerous predators were also its most benevolent protectors, and disturbing that balance would mean the end of galactic civilization as they knew it. The humans had chosen to remain hidden, not because they feared other species, but because they loved them too much to burden them with knowledge of the horrors that lurked in the darkness between stars.